The metal bars were cold, even though the sun burned the air above the market. She sat still, legs pulled tight to her chest, arms wrapped around her knees. Her skin was pale purple, covered in bruises and dust. Her eyes stared at nothing, just empty space in front of her. Every time someone passed by, she flinched, then froze, waiting. But no one stopped for her. Not anymore. The slavers had placed her in the back corner. No lights above her, no tag, no number, no price. "She's useless," one of them had said. Too quiet, too weak, too thin. No one wanted a slave who couldn't scream or fight or beg, and she no longer begged, not since they beat her last time she tried. The market was alive around her buyers, shouting, whips cracking, chains rattling. But her world was silent, like her mind had locked away every sound. It was safer that way, safer not to feel, not to hope, not to speak. Hope only hurt. Then he stopped. A man, tall, human, wearing dusty boots and a simple brown jacket. He didn't have the sharp smile of a buyer, or the cold eyes of a master. He just stood there, in front of her cage, looking. She didn't look up at first, but she felt it, his eyes, different, heavy, watching. Slowly, she turned her face, just a little. Just enough to see him through her hair. He knelt down, still silent, and looked straight into her eyes. No hunger, no hate, no games. Just silence, something strange, something soft. A slaver saw him and laughed. "That one? You serious? Human. She's broken, can't speak, barely eats. Probably won't last a week." The man didn't answer. He just stood up and pulled a few coins from his jacket. Placing them on the table beside the cage, the slaver blinked, then leaned in, counting the amount. It wasn't a large price, barely anything. But it was more than what she was worth to them. "Fine," the slaver grunted, unlocking the cage. "She's yours." The door creaked open. The girl didn't move. She stared at the man, unsure, confused. Her small body shaking, he didn't grab her. He didn't bark orders or throw a chain around her neck. Instead, he pulled out a soft gray blanket and held it out to her. She stared at it like it was a weapon, not understanding. "Come on," he said quietly, his voice low and calm. "Let's get you out of here." Something inside her broke, not like pain, but like glass cracking. Her hand reached out, slow, shaking, touching the blanket, warmth, softness. Not chains, not cold. She took it, and he gently helped her to her feet. The blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She followed him, step by slow step. Her legs were weak, unused to walking. But she didn't fall, not with him beside her. The crowd barely noticed. Just another deal, another slave changing hands. But for her, it was not a change of masters. It was the first time someone saw her. Truly saw her, and she didn't understand it. Not yet. The market smelled like fire. Sweat and old metal. The slave cages lined the walls like forgotten trash. Some cages had fighters. Some had servants, some had toys, but in the far corner. There was one cage no one wanted to look at. Inside, it sat a small alien girl. Knees to chest, head down, silent. She looked too thin, like she hadn't eaten in days. Her skin was a soft violet color, but covered in bruises and dirt. She had silver hair, messy and tangled, falling across her face. She didn't move when buyers passed. She didn't speak, didn't beg, didn't even cry anymore. The slavers called her useless. They used to hit her when she didn't scream. Now they just ignored her. "She's broken," one slaver had said, "can't even look you in the eye." So they left her in the dark corner, far from the lights, far from the crowd. She remembered when she still had hope. Hope that someone kind might buy her. Hope that someone might help her escape. But that hope was gone. Hope made her weak, and weakness got her punished. So now she stayed quiet. She stopped dreaming, stopped hoping. She didn't even lift her head anymore. If she looked too alive, they'd hit her again. It was safer to be invisible. Then footsteps stopped in front of her cage, not fast steps like the other buyers. These were slow, heavy, calm. She felt a presence, like someone was watching her, but different this time. No hunger, no laughter, no hate. She raised her head a little, just enough to peek through her hair. A human man stood there, tall and quiet. He had rough boots, a dusty brown jacket, and eyes that didn't shine with cruelty. He didn't smile like the others. He didn't laugh or mock. He just looked at her. She didn't understand it. Why was he looking at her? Was he another monster, hiding his true face? Or was this a new kind of trick? The slaver noticed him and walked over, chewing something in his teeth. "That one?" he said, pointing at the cage. "Nah, you don't want her. She's dead inside. Can't cook, can't clean, can't scream. She's not worth the food she eats." The human said nothing. He just reached into his coat and pulled out a handful of coins. He placed them on the crate in front of the slaver. Silent, the slaver laughed. "Surprised, she's all yours." "Human," he said, grabbing the key, "I'll throw in the collar for free." He unlocked the cage door with a loud click, then stepped back. The girl didn't move. She had learned not to trust open doors. Open doors meant new chains, new pain, but the man didn't rush in. He didn't grab her arm or yank her out. He knelt down, slow and gentle, holding something in his hands. A blanket, soft, warm, gray. He held it out to her like an offering. "No chains," he said quietly. "No pain. Come, if you want to leave. The choice is yours." A choice. She hadn't heard that word in years. She looked at his eyes, really looked. They were tired but kind, not pretending, not lying. Her fingers reached out slowly. Shaking, she touched the blanket, expecting it to vanish, but it was real. Warm, soft. She grabbed it and pulled it around herself. It felt like safety. He stood up and waited. Still no orders, no threats. She stood too. Legs weak, almost falling, he stepped beside her, steadying her without force, and together they walked out of the cage into the light. The crowd didn't notice, just another sale, another slave, but for her, it wasn't just freedom. It was something else. Something strange. Someone had bought her not for use, not for control, but maybe to set her free, and that thought was too big for her heart. So she held the blanket tighter and followed the human into a future she never believed she'd see. The sun was hot above the slave market, but the human walked as if the heat didn't matter. Beside him, the alien girl stayed silent, her bare feet stepping slowly over the dusty ground. She was still wrapped in the blanket he gave her, clutching it tightly like it was her only shield, and maybe it was. The crowd didn't look at them. No one cared when a human bought a useless alien slave. They had seen worse things here, much worse, but the human didn't care what they saw. He said nothing as he walked through the marketplace. He didn't speak to the sellers or smile at the guards. He simply moved forward, one step at a time. With the girl beside him, she glanced at him every few seconds, waiting for him to change, waiting for the moment when he would finally act like the others. Grab her, chain her, command her, but it never came. They reached the edge of the market, where a small transport ship waited. Old, scratched, and clearly not military. It looked like a ship used by traders or workers, not slavers. He opened the ramp and motioned for her to go inside first. She froze. Walking into an unknown ship with a stranger was dangerous, but she also knew she had no real choice not in this world. Still, something deep in her chest whispered, "He's not like them." She stepped forward, slow, her legs still shaking. The ramp was warm under her feet. The ship smelled of oil and old tools. Inside, it was quiet, not clean, but not dirty either. He followed her in and pressed a button, closing the ramp behind them. The girl stood near. The wall unsure where to go, she expected a command. A slap, maybe worse. But the man walked past her, set his bag down, and disappeared into another room. She stood still, confused, holding the blanket tighter. After a minute, he returned. Holding something, a small box of food, warm and smelling like real meat and broth. He placed it gently on a table nearby, then pulled a chair out and nodded. "To her eat," he said quietly, his voice calm, no anger, no pressure, just an offer. She stared at the food, her body screaming with hunger, but she didn't move. It had to be a trick, right? Slavers sometimes fed you well right before they sold you to worse places. But the smell was too much. Her hands moved on their own. She stepped forward, slow, sat down on the edge of the chair, and reached for the food. She expected it to be snatched away. It wasn't. She took the first bite, small and careful. Warm broth touched her tongue, soft vegetables, real meat, not the trash they gave her in the cage. Her eyes filled with tears she didn't understand. She kept eating, faster now, her hands shaking, her breath short. The man just sat nearby, working on some tool with quiet focus. He didn't stare at her, didn't smile like he owned her. He just let her be. When she was done, she looked at him. Again, still unsure. "What do you want?" She asked softly, her voice cracked, weak from years of silence. It was the first thing she had said out loud in days. He paused, then looked up at her. "I don't want anything," he said simply. "Not from you." She blinked, confused. Then, "Why? Why did you buy me?" She expected a story, a deal, maybe a lie, but his answer shocked her. "You looked like someone who needed to be free." He said, "That's all." Her mind didn't know what to do with those words. They didn't fit in her world. No one bought slaves to set them free. Not here, not ever. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice still shaking. He looked at her with tired eyes. "Just a mechanic," he said. "Lost someone a long time ago." He didn't say more. She sat in silence, her thoughts heavy. Her hands still held the blanket like it might vanish if she let go. The ship was quiet, except for the sound of his tools and her soft breathing. And for the first time in forever, she felt something strange. Safety. She wasn't in chains. She wasn't being touched or mocked. She wasn't being sold again. She was warm, fed, and for the first time in her life, she was free to sit and breathe. Maybe it wasn't a trick. Maybe this strange human really meant what he said. But her heart didn't know how to believe it. Not yet. So she sat there quietly, watching him work, wrapped in a blanket, holding on to hope like it was the last thing keeping her alive. The hum of the ship was soft. Like a slow heartbeat in metal, the girl sat near the edge of the bed, blanket still wrapped tightly around her. The food had filled her belly, but not her fear. She didn't trust the silence. Not yet. The human she still didn't know his name was working on some damaged equipment. He sat at a table across the small room, tools spread out like a puzzle. He didn't speak much, only hummed quietly, like he was lost in thought. She watched him from the corner of her eye, still waiting for the change, because it always came. Kind words always turned into commands. Soft hands always became fists. No one stayed gentle forever, not with a slave. Her fingers trembled against the blanket. She had been beaten for less, punished for slower thoughts. The cage had taught her many things: how to read faces, how to flinch early, how to hide pain. So even now, she stayed alert, ready to run or curl up if he raised his voice. But he didn't. He worked quietly, then got up and left the room. When he came back, he was holding something small. Clothes, simple but clean, folded neatly in his arms. He placed them on the bed beside her, then stepped back. "These are for you," he said. Voice calm, no more rags. She looked at the clothes, confused. This was too strange. New clothes? Not chains? not some twisted costume. She reached out slowly, touched the fabric. It was soft, worn, but real. She held it like it might disappear. "I can leave them here if you like," he said, noticing her hesitation. "I won't look. I'll be out there." He nodded toward the cockpit, then stepped out without another word. She stared at the door after he left. No lock clicked, no camera watched, just silence. Real silence. Still, she changed fast, her hands shaking as she slipped out of the dirty fabric she'd worn for years. She expected pain to follow, expected yelling, expected a slap, but none came, just quiet. She stood now in clean clothes, slightly big but warm, and she looked at herself in the small mirror on the wall. She didn't recognize the girl looking back. No collar, no dirt, no tears on her cheeks, just wide eyes and soft, violet skin. Still marked with scars but now standing, she stepped into the cockpit slowly. Her bare feet making no sound. The human was at the controls, checking star charts. He glanced back and gave a small smile, but didn't say anything. She sat in the co-pilot seat. Still silent, she watched the stars outside the window. They were so close, so bright. She had forgotten what they looked like from this side of the side. "Bars, what now?" she finally asked, her voice soft. "Where are we going?" He shrugged, still looking at the chart. "Somewhere quiet, somewhere safe," he said. "Out of slaver space, out of reach." She narrowed her eyes. "But why?" she asked, her voice sharper this time. "Why are you doing this?" He didn't answer at first, then he leaned back in his seat and looked at her, his eyes calm but tired. "You're not the first I've seen in chains," he said. "But you're the first I could afford to save." She didn't know what to say. Her heart ached with confusion. She wanted to believe him, but belief made you hope, and hope made you weak. She turned her head away and whispered, "You'll change. They all do." He didn't get angry, didn't try to defend himself. He just nodded slowly, as if he understood. "Maybe," he said, "but not today." And those 3 words hit her harder than any blow, because he didn't promise forever. He only promised now, and that was something real. Still, her heart built walls. Still, her body stayed tense. She didn't know how to relax. She didn't know how to believe. But when she looked at his hands dirty from tools, not blood, she started to wonder, maybe he wasn't like the rest. Maybe the ship rumbled softly as they jumped into hyperspace. She leaned back in the seat, her eyes still wide, her mind racing. This wasn't freedom yet, not fully, but it was the closest she had ever been. And deep inside her chest, a tiny voice whispered something she hadn't heard in years. "You are not an object. You are not forgotten. You are still alive." The next few days passed like a quiet dream. The girl, still without a name, spent most of her time sitting near the window of the ship. She watched the stars move slowly through space, blinking like soft lights in the darkness. She didn't talk much, and the human didn't push her to. He gave her space, food, warmth and silence, the safe kind. Each morning she expected it to end, expected the shouting, the pain, the change, but it never came. The human treated her the same. Every single day, like a person. One evening after dinner, she finally asked him, "Why do you live alone?" They were sitting near the engine room, the floor warm from the reactor beneath. He had been cleaning tools, but stopped when she spoke. She rarely asked questions, so when she did, it meant something. He looked at her, then set the tool down. He didn't smile, didn't pretend to be cheerful. Instead, he sighed and leaned back against the wall. His voice was soft, but it carried something heavy. "I wasn't always alone," he said. "I had a wife, a daughter, a little home on New Terra. We weren't rich, but we were happy." She listened, her eyes steady. No one had ever told her stories before, not real ones. Only threats, only commands. But this was something else. One day, he continued, there was a raid. Some slaver ships hit the outer towns, looking for easy targets. I was away that day, working on a mining rig. When I came back, everything was ash. She looked down, not sure what to say. The quiet between them was thick, full of pain that didn't need more words. She understood loss. She had lived in it for years. I searched every camp, every outpost, he said, hoping I'd find them alive, but they were gone, taken. Or worse, he rubbed his face, and for the first time, she saw it. He wasn't just tired, he was carrying grief so deep it had changed his bones. He didn't cry, but his voice trembled like a man walking through old ruins. I gave up fixing homes, he said, started fixing ships instead, kept moving. Never stayed in one place long enough to remember. Then why did you stop for me? She asked softly. He looked at her again, eyes red from old sadness. Because you looked the way she did the last time I saw her, he said. Scared, small. Trying to stay invisible, her heart twisted. She didn't like being compared to someone else's daughter. But something about the way he said it felt honest. Not forced. He didn't expect her to replace the girl he lost. He just didn't want to lose someone again, not if he could help it. Did you love them? She asked, not sure why she needed to know. He closed his eyes, leaned his head back against the wall. More than anything, he whispered. They were my world. Silence filled the room again, but this time, it wasn't heavy. It felt like something new had been placed between them, something shared. Something fragile, a bridge built from pain, not pity. You remind me of her, he said quietly. But I won't ask you to be her. You're your own person. And whatever they did to you, it doesn't define you. She didn't know how to answer. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Not as a slave, not as a tool, not as something broken, but as a soul. She turned her eyes to the floor, blinking away the heat behind them. Then she asked, do you ever stop hurting? He took a long breath, then shook his head. No, he said, but the hurt changes. It becomes a part of you, but it doesn't control you anymore. Some days are better than others. She nodded slowly. That made sense to her. More than anything else ever had, she thought of the cage, the chains, the fear. It was all still inside her, but it didn't own her like it used to. Not here, not with him. She looked at him again, saw how tired he was, how quiet, and for then. First time, she didn't feel afraid. She felt something warmer. You didn't have to stop for me, she said softly, but I'm glad you did. He gave her a small, tired smile. Me too, he whispered. And that night, for the first time in her life, she slept without chains, without fear, just stars above her and a quiet voice inside her heart saying, maybe I was never nothing. Maybe I was just waiting to be seen. Asterisk, the stars outside the ship glowed like soft candles, but inside, something even brighter was happening. The girl was changing, not her skin, not her scars, but something deeper. She was learning how to breathe without fear. Every day, she helped a little more. She started sweeping the floors, folding cloth, fixing small things he showed her. Not because she was told to, but because she wanted to. It made her feel useful, not as property, but as a person. But there was still one thing missing. A name. She had never had one. Not really. In the cages, they gave her a number. Something like 421 beta. Cold, sharp, easy to forget. Slavers didn't name slaves. Names meant identity, and identity was power. Now, sitting at the table after another quiet meal, she looked at the human. His hands were covered in oil. His eyes half asleep from working on the ship all day. She hesitated, then asked, "Do you think I should have a name?" He looked up slowly, like the question surprised him. Then he smiled. Not with his mouth, but with his eyes. "I think you already have one," he said. "You just haven't remembered it yet." She tilted her head. confused. Remembered? She asked, I don't think I ever had one. You were born free, right? He said. She nodded. Then someone named you. He said, your mother, your father, maybe both. It was taken from you, just like your freedom. Her throat tightened. She had no memory of her parents, only flashes of warm hands, soft voices, then cold cages and collars. But even if you don't remember, he continued, you can choose. Choose. She whispered, you mean, I can name myself. He leaned forward and looked her straight in the eye. You're not a number anymore. He said, you're not a thing. You deserve to be someone. She looked down, heart pounding. The idea felt too big for her. A name meant identity. Meant claiming something she had been told she didn't deserve. But a part of her wanted it, badly. Can you help me pick one? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. Then walked to a storage shelf and pulled out an old screen pad. He placed it in front of her and tapped to open a list of names. Some human, some from old languages, some from stars. She scrolled slowly. Fingers shaking, each name felt like a seed, waiting to be planted. Some were strong. Some soft, some sharp. She stopped on one, Luma. She said aloud, testing it on her tongue. The sound felt warm. Like light, he looked at her. His expression. Soft, that means light in the old earth tongue, he said. It suits you. Luma, she whispered again. Her chest felt strange full, like air rushing into a place that had been empty too long. It's mine now, she said, holding on to it like it might fly away. I'm Luma. He stood and bowed his head slightly. It's an honor to meet you, Luma, he said, voice kind, and for the first time. She smiled, not a small smile, not a fake one. A real smile, the kind that comes from deep inside the soul. Later that day, he took her to the registration terminal on a small station. A quiet outpost far from slaver space, run by old workers and neutral people. The room smelled like metal and dust, but for Luma, it felt like a throne room. He helped her fill out the form name. Luma, age, unknown species, Solari, for the first time. Her wrist wasn't scanned by force. For the first time, she wasn't tagged as property. She was listed as civilian. One of the clerks raised a brow when they saw her scars. You sure this one's free? The woman muttered. The human's voice turned hard. Cold. She's not this one. He said, her name is Luma, and yes, she's free. The clerk looked away quickly. Finishing the scan in silence when they walked out, Luma touched her wrist. There was no chain, no tag, just a clean scan showing her new ID. For the first time in her life, she existed. Officially, she looked up at the stars above the station and whispered her name again, Luma. It didn't erase. The pain didn't undo the years of cages or chains, but it gave her something new, a beginning. The ship returned to the slave market world, not for business, not for chains, but for justice. Luma stood behind the pilot seat, her hands gripping the edge. Her heart beat fast, not with fear, but with something stronger. This time, she was coming back free. The human had looked at her before they landed. You sure about this? He asked, his voice calm. She nodded once. I need them to see, she said. I need them to remember what they threw away. The ship touched down on the outer landing pad. The same dust, the same air, the same sick smell of metal and sweat. But everything was different now. Luma wasn't walking in as a slave. She was walking in with her head held high. She wore the same clothes he gave her, but now they were clean. Her scars were still there, but they weren't signs of shame. They were proof that she had survived, that she had won. The human walked beside her, silent and steady. They entered the market square together. And for a moment, everything stopped. Buyers and sellers turned to look. Some recognized her face. Some narrowed their eyes in disbelief. Is that? One man whispered. That's the broken one. Another said, the silent girl. From cage 7, she didn't flinch. She didn't bow her head. She walked through the crowd like she belonged, because now she did. The slaver who once owned her was still there, fat, cruel, chewing on something and laughing with a client. Until he saw her, he choked, eyes wide, face turning pale. "You?" he gasped. "You were sold. What are you doing here?" She stepped forward, her voice strong and clear. "I came back to show you what a mistake you made," the slaver sneered, but there was fear in his eyes. "You're still nothing," he growled. "You're just some runaway pet." The human stepped forward, voice sharp as a blade. "She's a registered free citizen," he said, "and I have the ID to prove it." He held up the digital badge, glowing softly with Luma's name. The crowd leaned closer. Reading the screen, her name, her freedom, her status set was all real. She chose her name. The human added, "Luma," which means light. The slaver stuttered, his pride cracking. "She was worthless," he hissed. "I sold her because she was broken." Luma's eyes narrowed. "No," she said. "You couldn't break me. You tried, but I'm still here, and you're still rotting in this pit." The crowd was no longer laughing, no longer walking. They were watching. Some looked at her with awe, others with shame, but no one looked away. A young alien girl in the corner, cage 1, who looked just like Luma had once pressed her face to the bars. She was dirty, bruised, and shaking. Luma saw her, and for a moment, her heart clenched, because that was her once. She walked over, knelt beside the cage, and looked the girl in the eye. "You're not a thing," she said softly. "You're a person. Don't forget that." The slaver rushed forward, but guards stepped in. They had seen enough. A whisper had spread across the station. The girl they thought was worthless had returned, free and proud, and she had witnesses. Many, watching, listening, changing. Luma stood up, looked one last time at the place that once owned her, then turned around and walked back toward the ship. She didn't run, she didn't hide. She walked slowly because she wanted every eye to see her leave on her own terms. The human followed, quiet, respectful, and as the ship doors closed behind them, Luma let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. It was done. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need fire or violence. She just needed them to see what she had become. Back in space, the stars looked clearer than ever. The human turned to her and asked, "Where to now, Luma?" She smiled. "Somewhere new," she said. "Somewhere I can help others like me." He nodded. "I'll follow you," he said, "wherever you go and in the silence of the stars." The girl who once had no name, no voice, no hope, now carried light strong enough to guide others. The galaxy had watched her rise, and it would never forget.